We've got breaking news coming in at the top of centre stage tonight that the Union Cabinet has approved changes in the Juvenile Justice Act lowering the age of prosecution in heinous crimes to 16 years from the present 18. This means rape or murder accused above the age of 16 can be tried in a regular court if the Juvenile Justice Board decides to do so. However, the amendment does not allow the juvenile to be sentenced to death or life imprisonment. The amendments also include facilitating faster adoption of children and setting up foster care homes. The Central Adoption Resource Authority will be made a statutory body, which means it will have powers to regulate inter-country adoptions along with issuing guidelines on adoption. This on a day when another gruesome crime committed by juveniles came to light in Delhi. Images that you're about to see will shock you. A young man stabbed to death in broad daylight in the capital. The brutal act captured on CCTV. The young man, Sachin, tried to save himself, but the murderers kept stabbing him till he dropped unconscious. Sachin's attackers are absconding. His family is inconsolable. What is happening in Delhi, at home or on the street? Are we safe anywhere?
Armed murderers operating with brazen fearlessness in the middle of a market, in broad daylight, in front of dozens of bystanders, in the heart of the national capital, stabbing a young man mercilessly, fearlessly. Is there no fear of the law on Delhi streets? This is how it began. Attackers are seen rushing towards two young men on a bike. One of the bikers flees, but the attackers catch hold of the other victim, Sachin, stabbing him repeatedly. Even as he tries to flee, the attackers go after him, grabbing him again, stabbing him again and again and again. The crowd on the streets watches but are too scared to intervene, to try to help the young man who is bleeding by now. Sachin tries to escape but is once again surrounded. The youth, who are also carrying pistols, fire a few rounds, threaten the crowd and leave. Once the attackers leave, a mob gathers at the spot.
यहाँ से 5 लड़के आए हैं, आते के साथ ही यहाँ इस जगह पर पहुँचने का चारों 5 लोग 3-4 पिस्टल थी, 2 या 3 पिस्टल थी और लड़कों के पास चाकू थे। यहाँ पे उसको मारा पहले, और जब एक लड़का भाग गया तो उसको लड़कों को पकड़ के 5 लड़कों ने 3-4 लड़कों ने चाकू मारे, अंदर दुकान में घुसे और 2-3 लड़के यहाँ से भगे, फिर उसके पीछे पीछे सारे लड़के भग गए और वो चाकू लहराते हुए एक दुकानदार ने उसे रोकने की कोशिश करी, उसको भी उन्होंने पिस्टल दिखाई है।
बाइक वहाँ रोक के उनकी तलवार को मारना शुरू करे और वो लड़का बचाव के लिए मेरी दुकान में भागा। चाकू उसको वहीं लगे थे, वो अंदर बचाव के लिए आया था, चाकू उसको बाहर लग गया था, बचाव के लिए दुकान के अंदर आगे गिर गया, आगे वो गिर गया, पर वो उठ नहीं पाया। पर वो
The victim, Sachin's family, is shocked. The grief-stricken family wants justice for their murdered son.
तो फोन आ गया कि वो आपका लड़का वहाँ पड़ा हुआ है। 18 साल का एक ही लड़का था, उसको बुखार भी आ रहा 3-4 दिन से, लेकिन उसका फोन आया, फोन 5 मिनट बाद वो चले गए।
His brutal stabbing has left Delhi stunned. Are we safe anywhere? Bureau Report, Headlines Today.
On this brutal murder of a 19-year-old who was stabbed to death in broad daylight, I want to go across to Ambedkar Nagar. Joining us from there is my colleague Ashish, my Rishi. Ashish, what do we know about the motive that led to this gruesome murder? Once again, juveniles caught in the act, but what is it that provoked them to react so violently and kill this young kid?
Well, Rahul, this area has been a little notorious, but at the same time, we have to realize that, the police is very ineffective in this area. As far as the motive goes, it is still unclear, but what people around say that there is a bright possibility that Sachin had a light tussle between him and there was another guy who was a part of the murder, the 5 guys who had come there to murder him. It was a possibility it that his bike and the other's bike, there was a collision between the two, and after that there was an ego problem between both of them, and which ultimately led to the murder. But it is still not clear. We know that 5 boys have been taken into the custody. They are still not showing arrest because since they are minors, and we still don't know the names. But as far as motive goes, it is still unclear, Rahul.
Okay, I want to go across to Brajesh Pandey, who's reporting on the decisions taken in the cabinet meeting where the age of what is called juvenile has been brought down from 18 to 16. And this on a day when this attack by juveniles has been caught on camera. What is not clear so far, Brajesh, is why is it that the amendment does not specify whether or not these people can be given life imprisonment or death, and if they can't be hanged or given a life term, why is that, Brajesh?
Well, they just want to factor in the fact that, initially there was a huge controversy over the fact that, that if you lower down the age, they don't have the mental bandwidth, they're not consummate, or they don't know for sure the kind of crime they have committed. And this is why most of the social activists, they were dead against the government lowering the age. And if you remember last time when this brutal gang rape and subsequent to the girl's death happened in Delhi, one of the guy who was supposed to have acted most violently was a juvenile, and he missed the capital punishment, or he missed the stringent of punishment just by a few months. So they're saying that by lowering the age from 18 to 16, they are factoring in this particular grey area of the law. But apart from that, they're also making sure that a degree of that they also cater to the fact that these people are juvenile, and just by lowering the age, if they are kept away from the life imprisonment or given a term of hanging, then a sense of justice is being meted out to them.
Okay, I want to get some reactions on the decision taken by the cabinet and whether or not this will act as a deterrent and reduce the number of juvenile crimes. I want to go across first to Dr. Ranjana Kumari, very well-known social activist, has very firm views on this. Madam, we had you with us the last time when we were discussing what the age in the Juvenile Act should be. Now that the cabinet has taken this decision, do you think this will act as a deterrent? Several crimes committed by juveniles in the last several months, that number on the rise. Do you think now that this decision has been taken, juveniles will know that they better be careful, because if they are not, they could be in for a longer term in prison than has been the case so far?
Well, Rahul, I think after Nirbhaya, this issue really caught up, because nature of crime was not considered in the case of this young man who committed the crime. So this is okay, because you have to look at the nature of crime. You have to look at the way juvenile crime is increasing, and you cannot say that a 16, 17, 18 is a child, because basically the Juvenile Justice Act gives coverage to children and protect children from being misused, because their vulnerability is very high. Police can misuse them, can beat them up and make them accept a crime which they may not have committed, or even giving them severe punishment can really scar their lives. So that is a consideration for which the whole Juvenile Justice Act was very, very considering the age as 18. But I would like to see that this kind of cases between 16 and 18 should be at all costs considered by the Juvenile Justice Board, and then looking at the nature of crime and severity of the crime should be referred to the normal court procedure. That care must be taken, and that's where I think we have to be very careful. And secondly, to answer your question, will this lower the juvenile crime? I feel that to get away with age factor in minds of young juvenile who thought that okay, we are young, so nothing will happen to us. We'll only be serving for 3 years of reform. That thing I'm sure is going to go out of their mind, and they will be, really, if they are committing such crime, they should be aware of the consequences.
No, because several people, I want to get a reaction from Meenakshi Ganguly as well, works in this area very closely. We've seen in several recent cases that juveniles, Meenakshi, were actually aware of the fact that they could get away with a 3-year term in prison despite having committed a crime. Now that that bar no longer exists, do you think it will act as a deterrent? Do you think the decision taken by the central government is a step in the right direction?
I think I have made my position on this clear several times. We we do not condone crimes by anybody, whether it is by juveniles or adults. Juveniles who commit crimes, heinous or otherwise, have to be held accountable. The question before us is which is the system under which they should be held accountable. And we are very clear that the system should be the juvenile justice system. And the reason for this is also very clear. That is because brain science has clearly shown that young people are given to peer pressure, they're given to taking actions that are, impulsive, and that there is a possibility of reform. And that is why the world over, including in the US, states are now moving towards a juvenile justice system. The reason I wanted to make one correction. The boy, I do not condone what happened in the 16 December case, and I do not condone the behavior of the boy who is now in the juvenile justice facility. But just to make a little correction, the IO, Mr. Anil Kumar, came out very clearly saying he was not the most heinous. And he was not the one who did all those monstrous acts as was perpetrated, what had been put out by the media before. So there is a lot of misinformation that is also there. The NCRB data very clearly shows that the juvenile crime is not really going up. In fact, it has gone down. It consists of only 1% of the crime. So, we are going by, my fear is that we are changing law by public sentiments, which is not the best grounds to change law.
You're saying that there's public anger, which is why the law has been changed.
Yeah, I mean, when
but I want to go across to a man who has a completely different view on this. Okay, complete what you're saying.
I'm watching the television just now, and the commentary you're giving. Anything like this is without a background, without explaining why the law is what it is going to harness the public sentiment. It is going to make people angry. But we have to have a more concerted debate. And my only request to the government is that if the insurance bill can be put before a standing committee, I do hope that this bill shall also be sent to a standing committee and there shall be wider discussion.
Okay, Inakshi, thank you for joining us with your views. I want to go across to Mr. Badrinath. He is the father of the girl we know as Nirbhaya, the victim of the December 16th gang rape in Delhi. बद्रीनाथ जी, आपकी वाइफ ने कई बार हमारे चैनल्स पे आके कहा कि जुवेनाइल जस्टिस एक्ट को बदलने की ज़रूरत है. कोई भी 16 साल का हो या 17 साल का हो, अगर उसने कोई संगीन गुनाह किया है तो उसके खिलाफ कार्रवाई होनी चाहिए. अब आखिरकार कैबिनेट ने इस फैसले को मंजूरी दी है. क्या आपको लगता है कि इससे एक डिटरेंस का मैसेज जाएगा? निर्भया के साथ जो हुआ वो शायद बाकी लड़कियों के साथ ना हो, इसके लिए कुछ डिटरेंस बनेगा?
हाँ, देखिए, ये मेरे को ये जानकर बड़ा खुशी हुआ कि चलो हमारा तो नहीं कुछ हो सकता, लेकिन आगे आने वाले जो बच्चे हैं, लड़कियां हैं, महिलाएं हैं, उनकी सुरक्षा जरूर बढ़ जाएगी. क्यों कि अगर 16 साल से ऊपर के जितने हैं, इतने क्राइम करने वाले कम हो जाएंगे. और अक्सर ज्यादा पर देखा कि 16 साल के बाद ही इस तरह के लोग क्राइम करते हैं. तो हमारा ये मानना है कि अगर कानून में बदलाव हो गया है तो निश्चित रूप से हमारे देश की महिलाएं सुरक्षित महसूस अपने आप को जरूर करेंगी. हम बहुत खुश हैं इस बात से. हम इस बात से खुश हैं कि वाकई हमारे अच्छे दिन आ गए हैं.
आप कह रहे हैं कि अच्छे दिन आ गए हैं, लेकिन आपसे पहले जो एक्टिविस्ट बोल रही थी बद्रीनाथ जी, उसने कहा कि जुवेनाइल्स को सुधारने की गुंजाइश रहती है. कई बार वो पीयर प्रेशर में, यानी अपने दोस्तों के दबाव में आके कुछ ऐसा कर देते हैं जो शायद वो नहीं करते. उन्हें अपने गुनाह का, अपनी गलती का एहसास होता है, लेकिन अगर आप उन्हें बहुत सख्त सजा दे देते हैं तो आप उनको उन कैदियों के बीच दे देते हैं जो कि पहले से ही बहुत सख्त कैदी होते हैं, जो बहुत खतरनाक कैदी होते हैं, और ऐसे में आप किसी मासूम की जिंदगी को हमेशा के लिए खराब कर देते हैं.
देखिए, अब उन्होंने क्यों कहा, कैसे कहा है तो मैं नहीं कह सकता, लेकिन जो व्यक्ति, जो बच्चा बलात्कार कर सकता है, मर्डर कर सकता है और उसको सुधार गृह में डालकर हम सोचते हैं कि उसको सुधार दें, सुधारने का मौका दे रहे हैं, तो वो सुधारने का मौका नहीं बल्कि उसको क्राइम बढ़ाने का मौका हम दे रहे हैं. आगे चल को बहुत बड़ा क्रिमिनल बन सकता है. हमने आज तक नहीं सुना है कि जो मर्डर किया हो, जो बलात्कार किया हो, वो लड़का अगर नाबालिग है और बालिग होने के बाद छूट गया है और वो कोई अच्छा काम कर रहा है, ऐसा हमने तो अभी तक देखा नहीं. जो भी उसमें से निकला है दूसरे परिवार को धमकी ही देता है. मैं सुना हो कि अगर मेरे से कुछ कहोगे तो मैं तुम्हारा ऐसा कर दूंगा, वैसा कर दूंगा. तो ये सब सारी बातें अपने अपने तरीके से लोग कहते हैं, लेकिन मैं इस बात से खुश हूँ कि कानून में बदलाव हो गया, 16 साल उम्र हो गई, तो निश्चित रूप से हमारे देश की बच्चियां महिलाएं सुरक्षित रहेंगी।
आपको लग रहा है कि महिलाएं सुरक्षित रहेंगी? आपको लग रहा है कि इस कानून से बहुत फर्क होगा? क्योंकि आज ही के दिन दिल्ली में एक वाकया ऐसा हुआ जिसमें जुवेनाइल्स ने दिन दहाड़े किसी की हत्या कर दी।
हाँ, यही प्रश्न मैं उनसे पूछना चाहूंगा कि उनको आप क्या कहोगे, उनको सुधार गृह में डाल दिया जाए? वो प्रेशर में आकर किसी का मर्डर कर दिए, चार पांच आदमी दौड़ रहे हैं, बच्चे आकर के किसी का मर्डर कर देते हैं, वो किसी मानसिक स्थिति का परेशान है, वो नहीं, ऐसा नहीं कुछ है। वो सिर्फ उनका ये पता हो गया है कि हम जुवेनाइल हैं, हम कुछ भी कर देंगे, कितना भी संगीन जुर्म क्यों न करें, हमारे को कुछ नहीं हो सकता। इसी वजह से उनके वारदात बढ़ती जा रही है और मैं बहुत खुश हूँ कि इससे वारदात जरूर रुकेगी।
आपको लग रहा है कि इससे वारदात रुकेगी? इन केस you've just tuned in, that was Nirbhaya's father welcoming the decision taken by the Union Cabinet. The Juvenile Justice Act has been amended. We've heard some very stinging criticism from activists who say that you take away the possibility of reform. The father, of course, is very happy, saying, "Mere अच्छे दिन आ गए, बाकी लड़कियों के अच्छे दिन आ गए." But is that indeed the case? Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, senior leader of the BJP, is also joining us on this broadcast now. Dr. Swamy, we heard from Meenakshi Ganguly, Dr. Anjana Kumari, both saying that this is a retrograde decision. The moment you take a step like this, you take away the possibility of the juvenile reforming. They're dead set against it.
Well, you see, this is a question which has been debated even in the United Nations, and the Beijing rules had said that while drafting the law, when you find that emotionally and intellectually mature people below the age of 18 committing crimes, at that time you have to make a proviso, a waiver, in which those people would be for heinous crimes judged differently in the courts of law. Now, there is a retributive factor in law. There is also a reformative aspect, and I would think that if a person below the age of 18 steals a bicycle or steals from a bakery shop, he should not be lumped with the hardened criminals in the criminal justice system. But where he commits a crime which he knows he's doing, for example rape, the Nirbhaya case is the example of that, or a terrorist like Kasab who claimed that he was a juvenile but couldn't produce his certificate, these people have to be treated in the retributive way.
No, but tell me one thing,
like
if I argue this from the other perspective, people
Yes.
watching will want to know, if another Nirbhaya-like case happens, why should that juvenile not be given life imprisonment or be given the death sentence, as would be the case with those above 18? If you're reducing the age to 16, why should you not go the whole hog and sentence him to death or give him life imprisonment like with everybody else?
Well, I had when the Supreme Court told me that all your arguments are fine, but you go and convince Parliament, because we can't change the law, we can only interpret the law. So I had in fact said that they should, in heinous crimes there should be no lower age limit, but it is quite obvious that committing rape you have to be above 14. Even in child labor, for example, we have 14.
So you disagree with the cabinet decision?
Well, I say it is not gone far enough, but good beginning.
Kamini Jaiswal is also joining us on this broadcast. Ms. Jaiswal, we're hearing from Dr. Subramaniam Swamy a very spirited defense of the need to amend the Juvenile Justice Act, and also the fact that amongst people watching the broadcast at home, especially after what happened in the Nirbhaya case, there was overwhelming support for the Juvenile Justice Act being amended. Do you think with this decision, juveniles would be under pressure in the knowledge that if they were to commit a heinous act, the law will come down hard against them? Will this serve as deterrence?
Yeah, I think it is time that the age was brought down from 18 to 16. Not only because the crimes are being committed, it's also because we have to look at the present fact situation. People at 16 today are much more mature than they were earlier. They are exposed to a lot and they are much more mature, and they understand the consequences of what they are doing. They know the act they are doing, they understand the consequences of what they are doing. So definitely it is, I think it is a step in the right direction, but it has to be applied, the discretion that has been given has to be really judicially applied. And
but how do you ensure that? How do you ensure that the amendment is not misused because people like Amol
how can you misuse it? Therefore,
who've been
there must
working
be-
for childcare or juvenile reform, say that the police will now misuse this. So instead of acting as a deterrence or
how
making
can
women
police
safer, it will
misuse it?
actually
I'm sorry.
be a big problem for young kids.
How can the police misuse it? Police are still catching the people who are around 16 years of age. The only difference is in the trial and the punishment. They should be the trial and the punishment today is not carried out the punishment is not the same as it is for other criminals, and the trial is not carried out in the normal court. So I don't understand how you're talking of police misuse. Thing is that we still have to take care of these people because punishment is to be reformative. Even if they are committing these offences and they are awarded higher punishments than they would otherwise be awarded under the Juvenile Justice Act, what we have to take care of that these people are not kept with hardened, grown-up criminals. They are given a chance to reform, and we have a separate jail for them.
You're
can't
saying
put them
that
with the rest.
efforts must be made to ensure that the law is not misused, that the amendment doesn't become a problem in juvenile reform. But we've seen very often, Dr. Swami, in the past that even though they're introduced with the most noble intentions, in a while the amendments actually turn out to be a much bigger problem than the one that they were meant to solve.
Well, that's not only true for this law. Almost every law that is there, it says it requires much greater social consciousness, education, so on. And there are vested interests, just as much as people today blame police for doing this and police for doing that, but we have no alternative police. The same thing people say that NGOs have become now a vested interest to ensure that the law is not amended. Now, I think we have to therefore know one thing, that there is a line to draw between reformative and retributive. And where it's a retributive, where retribution has to take place, you have to you have to lower the law age if in fact the crime is that kind. Let me say that this IPC has had 12 years as the cutoff date. Britain even today has 14 years. But in our case, we will keep it 18 years, but for those crimes which are petty, where we don't want young children to and people below the age of 18 to mingle with hardened criminals.
He's often called a loose cannon or a maverick, but Dr. Subramaniam Swamy once again showing that once he takes up a crusade or a cause, he's usually able to take it to its conclusion, building public pressure in a way that the Juvenile Justice Act finally being amended. And to a lot of people who've demanded this change, they would be grateful for the effort that you've made. So thank you for that, Dr. Swamy.
And thank Menaka Gandhi also.
Thank Menaka Gandhi for pushing this through and for the cabinet to amend this. But the most important benchmark really is whether or not it serves as deterrence. If it doesn't, then it serves no purpose.
That we can review.
That of course needs to be reviewed. Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, congratulations on being able to push this cause through. The change is finally here. We of course wait to see whether it brings deterrence in its wake or not, whether it makes juveniles more careful.